Hello, my name is Edmund Demarche. I'm the editor of the Trends Journal. I'm here with Professor Marandi from the University of Tehran. Professor Marandi, thank you for joining the Trends Journal again. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Edmund.
I have two topics that I want to get to, but first, what's going on in Australia and Iran? That seems like it went from 0 to 100 very quickly. I'm going to read something from the New York Times. This was published yesterday. So just to get everyone up to speed, Australia is accusing Iran of directing an arson attack or 2 arson attacks on Jewish businesses. The Prime Minister from Australia said these were extraordinary and dangerous acts of aggression orchestrated by a foreign nation on Australian soil. He said it was an attempt to undermine social cohesion and sow discord in our community. Now, this was the response from the Iranian foreign minister. He said, Iran is home to among the world's oldest Jewish communities, including dozens of synagogues, accusing Iran of attacking such sites in Australia, while we do our utmost to protect them in our own country, makes 0 sense. So, Professor Marandi, what's your take on the accusations, the allegations from Australia, especially at a time when so many protests in the country are breaking out over what the IDF and Israel is doing in Gaza?
This is all about the situation in Australia and how people have turned against the Israeli regime and how they've courageously gone to the streets across the country in huge numbers, opposing Zionism and the genocide and the Holocaust in Gaza. And so they wanted distraction. And we saw Netanyahu send a letter to the Australian government just a few days ago, effectively threatening them. And so when the overlords threaten the leaders in Western countries, we know exactly what happens. The Zionist lobby is immensely powerful across Western countries. So this is all nonsense, of course, but it's not something that surprises us. In 2018, they did the same thing in Albania. The Israeli regime forced the Albanian government to expel the Iranian ambassador, the cultural center, the language institute that was there. And this is the same thing. There's no evidence. I've never been to Australia. I heard that one of those places was actually an anti-Zionist center. They were not Zionists. But, and we know that there are many cases where Zionists themselves have carried out such acts in order to blame pro-Palestinian activists. This is something quite normal. But Iran has an ancient Jewish community, as the foreign minister said. Iran has synagogues, it has kosher restaurants, and according to the Iranian constitution, the Jewish community in Iran must have at least one MP in parliament, and we have a Jewish MP in the Iranian parliament. So this is anti-Iranian propaganda to distract attention away from the Holocaust. And it's amazing that the Israeli regime, despite carrying out this genocide for almost 2 years now, and we have to remember that the ICJ, well over a year and a half ago, was saying that this could be a genocide. Well over a year and a half ago. Now it's, what do we call it now? So despite all that, the Australian government has done nothing to the Israeli regime's ambassador. There are no sanctions. They have no problems. They continue to do business as usual. So I think for those who have open eyes, and there are many nowadays, it's quite clear that this is a distraction, it's fake news, and the Australian government is not going to achieve anything by doing this.
You mentioned Netanyahu. He gave an interview to an American podcaster this week where he talked about the new threats of Iranian weapons, and the person who was interviewing him was in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and Netanyahu said, yeah, they're trying to produce missiles that can strike even Fort Lauderdale and Miami. Are we seeing another ramp up before a new confrontation between Israel, the U.S., and Iran, or where do you see us standing on that? Are things heating up? We've spoken about this before in the past, and you've told me that. Oh, I'm sorry. You told me that Iran is prepared, and for whatever happens next. Do you see us, since our last conversation, are we closer or farther away from a new confrontation between Israel and Iran?
I don't know if we're going to have some sort of confrontation anytime soon, but the Iranians are definitely preparing themselves for it. And in the last war, it's clear that the Israelis lost. They were the ones who sought the ceasefire. And Steve Bannon said very clearly on two occasions, at least that I've seen, that it was the Israelis that needed the ceasefire and they were in deep trouble. And the Iranians initially did not accept a cessation of hostilities until after they got some concessions from the Americans. And Trump alluded to one of them when he spoke about Iran being able to sell oil to China. But the Iranians have, uh, after this blitzkrieg attack that was, of course, illegal and carried out while the United States was pretending to do negotiations with Iran. As a result of this attack, the Iranians have learned a lot about the Israeli regime's capabilities, and they are reorganizing, and of course, they are improving their defensive and also offensive capabilities. If the Israeli regime strikes again, it will be far worse for them than last time round. And Iran won't be caught off guard, at least not the way it was last time. So, and of course, there's always a potential for Iran to strike because the Israeli regime constantly threatens Iran with attack. The Iranians are not doing that, but the Israelis are doing it regularly. There is always that potential, and the Zionist lobby in the United States, of course, would like to sacrifice American lives for the Israeli regime because their priority is Israel. It has nothing. They don't care about the fate of the United States. They've pushed the United States into war after war in this region, destroying so much of the U.S. economy as a result. The war in Afghanistan and Iraq and Libya and the endless wars, basically, and the neocons, the Zionists, in Ukraine. To all of this, is you can attribute to their policies and their activism. So I can't rule it out. I cannot, on the other hand, say that it is inevitable. But what I can say is that Iran is stronger today than it was before the war, and Iranian society is more united. The military is preparing itself, and the political leadership is also reorganizing alongside with the military to prepare itself for such an event. Just one point that I think is I should add to all this is that the Israeli regime has lost any credibility that it had once upon a time, thanks to Western media and Western think tanks and Western institutions. No one believes the Israeli regime. No one believes Netanyahu. He's a serial liar. People like ourselves who were politically active years ago, we all knew who Netanyahu was and that he's been lying about Iran's nuclear program since 1992. I think it was then when he first claimed that Iran was on the verge of developing a nuclear weapon, 2-3 years away, apparently, if I'm not mistaken, 2 years or 3 years. Ever since then, it's always been a few months away, a couple of years away. So we all know that he's lying, but now even ordinary people, they know what the Israeli regime is all about. Even polls carried out by Western institutions, which are close to the Israeli regime, they are pointing out that the overwhelming majority, even in the United States and the West, are find what the Israeli regime is doing to be completely unacceptable. So no sane person believes that Iran is seeking to attack the United States or Europe. That's just fake propaganda to fool the most naive and to rally the Israeli pursuers.
Here's a tweet from NBC News. It came out an hour ago. It said the head of the UN watchdog, the IAEA, said he is not yet satisfied with Iran's cooperation with the international inspectors, and this is just as European leaders appeared poised to reimpose sanctions on Tehran. Is this another gamesmanship? Is this more gamesmanship from the IAEA? Right before Israel launched its war, they came out with that warning that Iran is not in compliance anymore, and now they're coming out right before new sanctions. Is that what we're seeing here? Is that a reasonable take on that?
Yes, the IAEA is a body that's controlled by the West. And like other international institutions that were created after the Second World War. And the head of that organization is a tool of the West. That's always been the case, especially in recent years. There's a WikiLeaks document that your viewers could find. It's online, where the previous head of the organization, Mr. Amano, when he wanted to be elected, he went and told the Americans that, look, if you choose me, I will support all of your policies. I will be in your camp on all the key issues. That's how it works. So the head of the IAEA will prepare the ground for aggression. He will do as the Americans say. If the Americans say push harder, they'll push harder. If they say move slower, he'll move slower. Right now, they want to increase tensions with Iran, just like they've been doing with Russia, with China, and everyone else, literally, with India, with Brazil. So they want to increase pressure on Iran because that is what the Israeli regime needs. We have to always remember Western policy in West Asia, in North and North Africa, is always in line with Israeli regime needs. The dirty war on Syria was all about Israel. The, the attempt to undermine Lebanon, all about Israel. The genocidal war in Yemen that the Saudis and the Emiratis carried out for 7 years against the people of Yemen, it's all about Israel. Libya, Israel, Iraq, all of these are about the Israeli regime. Remember, the document which the former head of NATO saw or was told about in the Pentagon, that the United States wants to overthrow 7 governments in 5 years. Wesley Clark, he said
Yeah.
this at least on, I've seen him say it at least on one occasion, maybe 2. That's basically been the plan all along. So anything that you see in this region, the dirty war in Syria was not about liberation. Those who foolishly supported Western policy were basically supporting Israeli policy. And today, the IAEA's chief is doing the bidding of the Israeli regime, the Zionist lobby, and the US government.
I know we have a limited amount of time. I wanted to get your take now on Gaza. Anyone who follows, and I suggest people do, you on X, they see you post some real terrible and just heartbreaking. It's not even heartbreaking. It's beyond heartbreaking at this point. Images of Gazan children, many with devastating injuries, and you'll post things like, how the IDF's responsible for this and and Western backing. Is it taking its toll at all on you when you see this? Like, what's your emotional state when you see these things and repost it? Because I could feel almost the anger but mixed with pain in the messages that you post on X. Can you, not to get too into those details, but can you go into a personal side of those posts, because it's just terrible to see what's going on in Gaza.
Yes, I actually joined Twitter pretty late compared to many others, and I wasn't all that active until even when I was in Vienna as a media advisor for the nuclear team. I was posting a few things a day. After October the 7th, I've been posting a lot, probably 10, 15, 20 a day. And it's just photos or footage of the atrocities in Gaza, sometimes Lebanon, sometimes Yemen, sometimes Syria, but overwhelmingly Gaza, sometimes the West Bank, sometimes Iran, when the Israeli regime slaughtered ordinary people in Iran, overwhelmingly ordinary people. But I only do it, and I don't like doing it. It bothers me, and some of the footage I don't even see till the end. I just see the first 4 or 5 seconds, and I just can't. But I do post it, and I know that a lot of people don't like it. People have told me that they sometimes mute me because they don't want to see these images. The reason why I do it is because I want people to always remember that this is not stopping. It's going on as you and I are speaking right now. It's happening. When you go to bed tonight, when I go to bed tonight, it's still happening. When you get up in the morning, I get up in the morning, it's still happening. And so the only way to bring an end to this is to create greater anger among people across the world so that people protest. And this is something that many are doing, each in their own way. People on the streets, you see it in countries in East Asia, in front of Israel, the embassies of Western governments or the Israeli regime, people stand and protest. You see it You see people boycotting Western products, American products, American goods, or even restaurants because of it. You see people boycotting in their own way, all in any way that they can. And this is all I can do because in Iran we don't have we don't have McDonald's for me to boycott. We don't have Wendy's for me to boycott. We don't have Oreo cookies being sold broadly everywhere for me to boycott. So, or we don't have their company at least here having an office. So all I can do is be active this way. And yes, it bothers me a lot, and people around me have said that it's clear that it weighs me down at times. Sometimes less, sometimes more. But I think it's true for all of us. It's like a dark cloud that's hanging over all of our heads, even when we are enjoying some trip or we go out with friends. It it's not like it was 2 3 years ago because you always at least for momentarily or uh, in the middle of some activity you see a photo or footage or some news and it has an effect on your day. Sometimes it just ruins your day, sometimes it has a small effect, but it's something that I think bothers many people. I'm sure you are the same as I, and I'm sure your viewers who are all very politically knowledgeable people, otherwise they wouldn't be following your accounts or your channel. Um, they feel the same way as I do and as you do.
Yeah, I have two more questions. Jake Sullivan, he was interviewed on a podcast out here in the U.S. And he was asked about the continued weapon sales by the U.S. to Israel, given what's going on in Gaza. He mentioned how Israel ramped up the genocide, or he didn't say genocide. He said the war in March, and he said if he would be inclined to oppose weapon sales. Now, this is Joe Biden's former national security advisor, who really it seems like he had a big change of heart. Is this just another example of former Biden officials coming out and now being able to speak out on their own morals, their own moral compass, or is this just political cowardice when they were in office?
Well, I would rather ask you that question. You know more about the United States than I, but I think it's very clear that now that he's out of office, like many others, when they no longer have to make a decision and to stand up to the Israeli regime and to pay a heavy price for saying anything, they can make these statements. But he enabled this genocide. He enabled the ongoing Holocaust. He was a national security advisor. And he is a brutal and ruthless person. He is the same person that in 2012, February the 12th, sent an email when he worked for Hillary Clinton, who was at that time the Secretary of State. And he said that in Syria, Al Qaeda is on our side. So this dirty war in Syria was all something that they knew from the beginning, a dirty war where extremists were being empowered by the West to destroy the country. And foolish people who were fooled by propaganda from Qatar, Al Jazeera, and their elaborate network of cultural centers and religious centers and media outlets, and Saudi Arabia and Turkey, which is Erdogan is a part of NATO. Many people were fooled by by them promoting sectarianism and hatred. And in the West, they were fooled by the Western media narrative about human rights and about human values and about a revolution. And they supported this. But now we see, now that Al Qaeda and ISIS are in power in Syria, how they're killing people for their beliefs and how they are submitting to the Israeli regime and doing deals with the Israelis that the previous government would never have done. And that's and people who have open eyes, people who are honest with themselves, they're seeing the reality now. So when Jake Sullivan speaks about the Israeli regime, I'm absolutely certain that if he was still in power, he would be doing the exact same thing as the Trump regime is doing. However, what this does show, and the fact that so many other Western politicians are saying the same thing, it shows that the public, despite the censorship on social media and despite Western mainstream media, the public is seeing the reality and the public is becoming increasingly outraged. And these people are responding to the shift, the extraordinary shift that we're seeing in Western countries, let alone the rest of the world. They're not doing it because they have any sense of morality. They're doing it because they need to remain relevant. And for example, the fact that European countries are now talking about recognizing Palestine, it's a worthless gesture. It's not going to change anything. It's just a piece of paper. But they're doing it because the public demands that they do something. So they take the route that causes the least difficulty for them. And in the case of Jake Sullivan, he can look back and say, yeah, Netanyahu wasn't a really good guy. He wasn't as good as we thought. And yeah, maybe we should do something about it. But he had so much time to do so. I mean, how long has it been since he's left office? It's been like 7 months. He had more than well over, he had a year and a half to stop this. But he gave the Israelis everything they needed to carry out the genocide.
It's interesting to see what's going on in politics here in the U.S. between Democrats and Republicans, and with the midterms eventually coming up, and the position that Democrats will take on Israel and Gaza. It seems like Republicans are still fully committed to Israel. However, Democrats are being confronted, and some have spoken out against what's going on in Gaza. My last question to you is this. This is Tom Barak. He's the special envoy for Trump in the Middle East. He was in Beirut, and he was with Morgan Ortagus. She's like his deputy. And he got a lot of criticism over this comment.
Okay, wait. We're going to have a different set of rules, right? Please be quiet for a moment. And I want to tell you something. The moment that this starts becoming chaotic, like animalistic, we're gone. So you want to know what's happening? Act civilized, act kind, act tolerant, because this is the problem with what's happening in the region.
Okay, so he got criticized for telling the reporters here to not be animalistic, and one of the criticisms on social media was that this is the hubris that the U.S. approaches any kind of Middle East negotiations, and how they treat the countries that they're dealing with over there. That was the main takeaway as far as criticism on social media, and he also had to cut his trip short over there. I wanted to hear your opinion on his statements and what you think about the fallout.
This is all racism and Orientalism, and those who are from our part of the world or anywhere from the global south that go to the West and mimic these narratives, they are Orientalized Orientals. They say they repeat these narratives about the non-Western world. It's quite stunning how arrogant he is, and that he says it in front of the reporters that are overwhelmingly obedient to the West. The money in Lebanon, the majority of the people in Lebanon support the resistance, but the money is with the West. The media, they're funded by Qatar, by Saudi Arabia, by other countries, and they are pro-Western. I mean, even Al Jazeera, when they show sympathy for Palestine, but they don't show sympathy for the broader resistance. If they did, the Americans would shut them down immediately, or at least they would feel forced to, because they have no real basis in their own society, and they have no legitimacy as a family dictatorship like the other family dictatorships in the Arab side of the Persian Gulf. So he was basically calling his own supporters and those who are obedient to the West animal-like, and it hurt himself and it hurt the United States, because everyone knows that all the wars in this region are being carried out by the West. Israel is just attacking country after country, slaughtering innocent people across the board with the full support of the West, and people in the West know it. People in our region know it. And only a small minority of people, such as a segment of Lebanese society, which has always been affiliated, for example, the Lebanese Forces, which is a fascistic organization that helped the Israelis carry out the genocide in Beirut in 1982, where they slaughtered 3,000 Palestinians. I mean, that segment of Lebanese society they're allies of the Zionists. except for them and some other bought-off people and those who are desperate and get handouts. People of Lebanon know quite well who is responsible for the crimes in the region. The West created Saddam Hussein. They gave him chemical weapons to use against Iran and his own people. Then they overthrew Saddam Hussein in the name of the chemical weapons that they gave to him. They created Al-Qaeda, and then they used it, and then they pretended to be fighting against it in the war against terrorism, and they waged war after war in the name of fighting Al-Qaeda, and then they use Al-Qaeda in Libya and then in Syria. And now again, we see Al-Qaeda is being used as a tool, and ISIS, of course, which is a close cousin and brother of Al-Qaeda. We all know what's going on. And even in the West, where people are not really allowed to see the truth because of how social media works, algorithms, censorship. I've been removed from Facebook and Instagram years ago. And on my Twitter account, on many occasions, you can tell that it's often shadow banned at certain times. So many of my students have lost their accounts. Many of my acquaintances, not just in Iran but across this region, have lost their accounts. Even in Twitter now, you see that many still have problems, or some do. Oh, Twitter is a bit better, but still. So, but in any case, despite all that, people see through all this even in the West, let alone in our part of the world. So when he talks about animalistic, he's referring basically to his own allies and his genocidal friends in Tel Aviv and in Washington.
Professor Marandi, thank you so much for joining the Trends Journal today. You always tie things together so well for us. We appreciate that. And everyone go check out Professor Marandi on X. Professor, thank you so much.
Thank you, Edmund.